Alright. Peace. Welcome back. This is the third part to Albert Freudstein. Okay. The little mini series we put together. This is the last video on it. Okay. Did this for the collective. Alright. We gotta break stuff down. Okay. Then rebuild. Alright. With new things. So I'm not just breaking stuff down, not presenting stuff. Alright. That already exists. Not making this stuff up. Okay. So, in the first two parts, we've already basically figured out that Einstein didn't create none of this stuff. Okay, this is other people's works, right? So, I'm going to use special relativity and general relativity. Those are the terms we're going to use. Okay, so in this video, we're going to debunk those ideas. Okay, and whatever works we're keeping, but that's other people's work. Okay, so they like to brag that basically general relativity, special relativity, and quantum mechanics are their best theories, and they're based on predictions, all this stuff, right? So we're going to go over wrong predictions, okay? And as these keep building on, we're going to learn that if anybody was to bring a theory, they would be scrutinizing it so hard that we wouldn't even have this many outs. So let's figure out what I'm talking about, okay? So my first point is going to be dark matter, okay? Dark matter exists because spiral galaxies spin too fast, according to relativity. So they needed a type of matter that we couldn't see to make it make sense, okay? Because their theory doesn't make sense, they needed to create something fake that doesn't exist. Okay? So this is where the mind poison starts to come in. Okay? And to all the elder teachers that were teaching before that had to use this language to communicate points to their people, it's cool. Alright? Now we're in a time of information where we're knowing what the truth is for what it is. Okay, so this is what it is. Alright? Dark matter doesn't even exist, okay? And it's another fancy term for ether, okay? Just like dark energy, quantum foam, quantum fluctuations, bosonic field, unified field, quantum field. We're going to get into all that stuff, okay? And actually, a different video, all right? But for now, we're tackling special relativity and general relativity. And the reason we're tackling both is because both are used. They interchange between them however they feel like to make it make sense, okay? Because it doesn't make sense in their version of these equations, okay? So, one common thing you're going to hear, it's a big theme, is that the speed of light is constant in a vacuum, okay? There is no speed of light. Okay, we already went over that, okay, multiple times, okay? That light doesn't move, it doesn't travel, okay? And we use a cup as an example, okay? And I can use this as an example, okay? See here, right? This candle residue, this wax and stuff, okay? You see this cup, right? This glass, right? So the light, right? Let me turn the light on so y'all can see what I mean, okay? You can get an even better picture of what's going on here. Okay. What they're claiming is light from there travels through here, slows down, okay, and in here speeds back up, slows down again, and then exiting this medium, it speeds back up, okay. And they don't provide no mechanism for that energy, where it comes from, how it speeds things up, slows it down, anything. The medium slows it down, they don't have no mechanism for how it speeds it up, okay. The speed of light being constant in a vacuum, the speed of light being constant in a vacuum, okay, which is the maximum perturbation within a medium, okay, so the most it could, it's elasticity, okay. The speed of light was debunked in the early 1900s, okay, by the Michelson-Gale-Pearson experiment itself, which they used to debunk the ether, okay. And this is an analysis, okay? It's called the Michelson-Gale-Pearson experiment, the factual analysis, okay? It's by Gocho Charlanov, okay? And within this scientific paper, okay, he finds that Michelson Morley himself, okay, found that the speed of light wasn't constant within a vacuum, okay? And he didn't write about it, but he found it within his works. That's what this whole scientific paper is about. Okay, so the whole mathematics of their equations being built on the speed of light c being constant isn't even true. Okay, just like the mass gravitational model, which doesn't work either, okay, because in the last video you've seen that they could say gravity could exist without mass, okay, and all the equations are built on the c and the m and the m and the attractant and all that stuff. So all their equations, they're misinterpreting information, okay, feeding you this interpretation, right, making you believe something, okay, and creating mathematical models, okay, and a lot of them aren't even true, okay. Craziness. So there was a scientist, a physicist, who actually debunked Einstein. Okay, his name was John Bell. Okay, he proves one of Einstein's ideas wrong. Okay, and just to give y'all a brief reading, if you can't read this, okay, 50 years ago, scientist John Stuart Bell proved Einstein wrong. Okay, Bell is regarded as one of the 20th century's greatest physicists, widely believed to have been in line for a Nobel Prize, okay, but he died from a stroke in the 1990, okay. He's formerly known as on the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, demonstrated that Einstein's views on quantum mechanics, the behavior of very small things like atoms and subatomic particles, were incorrect, okay. So another failed prediction, okay, which their whole models are built on making correct predictions, right? This is another scientific paper, okay. It's called Wrong Predictions, of Special Relativity on GPS SAGNet Corrections, okay. I'm not going to read this whole paper, all right? But what this paper basically says, right, for anyone who wants to read it, by Henok Tadesse, all right, if I'm butchering your name, I apologize, okay, HenokTadesse, okay, that's the name of the paper, that's the name who wrote it, okay. And within this paper, what they discuss is that special relativity is incorrect within their predictions, okay, and that you could actually use Lorentz transformations, okay, to solve problems that they created, okay, some of them being length contraction and time dilation, all right. And if you constantly use the Lorentz transformations, if you keep repeating the equations, then you'll eventually get to the answers, okay. And it shows wrong predictions on special relativity's part, okay, trying to use those equations. And that's very important because I'm going to present works on how fractal geometry is what Euclidean geometry tries to do, okay. And if you were to scale the fractals to the size of planetary scale, that those numbers will match, okay, using the golden ratio and other mathematics, okay. I'm gonna build models proving that stuff, okay. And if it doesn't prove it, we're gonna take the data, we're gonna see where it lands, okay. Because what they like to do is try and just prove themselves right, okay. So no matter how many predictions I show here that are wrong, these people are still gonna believe what they believe, okay. And we already demonstrated that in other videos using the Stanford experiment, the bias experiment, right? So here's another scientific paper, okay. The correct derivation of Kepler's third law for circular orbits reveals a fatal flaw in general relativity theory, okay. And we're not going to read this whole paper either, okay. But basically, what this scientific paper reveals is that general relativity is wrong in their predictions, and Kepler's law is one way which they could derive that. Okay, so let's actually go through the summary to see what they say. Okay, I'm not going to read this whole scientific paper. Okay, I'm going to give y'all a little bit. Okay, for people who want to read it, they can read it on their own. Okay, but the first sentence in this conclusion is that in this article, it was clearly shown that the Schwarzschild metric of general relativity theory does not correspond to reality. Okay, I'm not even going to read all that. That's all y'all need there. Okay, for anyone who wants to read that, all right, analyze it and try and prove it wrong. Okay, the correct derivation of Kepler's third law for circular orbits reveals a fatal flaw in general relativity theory by Jaroslav Hynek. Okay, if I'm butchering your name, I apologize, but it's spelled JAROSLAVHYNECEK. All right, moving on. Studying the star Vega, okay, or the pulsar Vega, yeah, the star, okay, pulsar. They figured out, or they actually came up with the data that showed that there's a discrepancy within the predictions of general relativity and the actual data of what's going on within this pulsar, okay? And it's a lot of plasma fluctuations, okay? But there's scientific papers on this, all right? And one of the scientific papers is called Pulsars, a key to unlocking the interstellar medium by Laura M. Marshek. Okay, if I'm butchering your name, I apologize, okay? But it's Laura, Laura M, middle name, last name Marschke. Okay, for anyone who's curious, who wants to read about that and how general relativity is wrong within their predictions of this particular pulsar, okay, and what's going on with the flux and all those things, interesting paper to read, okay? So, moving on. I just mentioned how they build models based on M1, M2, which is mass, which is the gravity, the whole orbital system, which is how they base their models, right? Which they have to be attracted to big masses, which are stars and stuff like that, right? But there's things that go against those predictions too, right? And there's called rogue planets, okay? So rogue planets travel throughout the universe, okay, according to them, without any sort of host, right? No gravitational hold, right? How they formed, how they got out of their supposed orbits, no one knows, okay? But this isn't exclusive to just planets or pieces of planets, which should be asteroids and comets, okay? This actually happens to stars. They're called rogue stars, okay? We're going to see that right here. Rogue stars. Rogue stars have been found roaming in between galaxies. So rogue stars travel between galaxies without no gravitational pulls or none of those things that they're talking about, okay? Because what we're going to learn throughout this whole series, that all gravity is two masses being attracted to each other, but they're really losing inertia between each other, and they're going to a point in counter space, okay? And that's through two fields when they mutually interact. And when those two fields mutually interact, okay, if there's a loss of inertia between the two, they will both find the quickest point of fucking resistance, okay, which is going to be the loss of their inertia. They're going to be pulled to a dielectric portal between both of them, okay? Anyway, rogue stars, okay, shouldn't exist in their models, okay, but these things exist. Rogue planets, rogue stars. There's even rogue black holes. A fucking rogue black hole. So black hole, according to, and we're gonna get into a black hole because according to Einstein, or relativity, general relativity, special relativity, a black hole is supposed to be made of only light. And it's not supposed to be traveling nowhere. Okay? And it's supposed to be this thing that eats space, information, light, and every single thing. Okay? But these things are somehow zooming through the fucking universe. Okay? How? Doesn't make sense according to the way they're teaching these things being. Right? So, a black hole being made, a black hole made from pure light is impossible thanks to quantum physics. Okay? So what special relativity, general relativity we call a Kugelblitz. Okay? A Kugelblitz. Okay? That shit is impossible. Okay? So that's another failed prediction. Alright? They don't even know what black holes are. Okay? And we're going to demonstrate that right now. Okay? Black hole or neutron star? Okay? Question mark. Okay? So, when the most massive stars die, they collapse under their own gravity and leave behind black holes. When stars that are a bit less massive die, they explode and leave behind dense, dead remnants of stars called neutron stars. Okay, so the difference to them between a fucking neutron star and a black hole is size. Size. The size of this mass created this. The size of this mass created that. They can't even tell the difference. Okay, very important. Because there's something called mini black holes. Mini black holes, quantum black holes, neutron star, black hole, massive black hole. But when we get out of this mind poison and we get to what things really are, okay, outside of the engineering equations that work for engineering purposes, right? And we focus on the universe and how that works, that's when the answers start to make sense, okay? But just rolling with things because people said so, it's so crazy because these people, they know these things. Like, these people, they know these things. And they're teaching this as their God, okay? Which is crazy. It's crazy, all right? So there's something called the black hole information paradox, okay? And basically, they don't know what happens to information when it enters a black hole, okay? Because they think information is a physical thing, but not a physical thing. It's like a particle. There's probably like an information particle somewhere within their theory, right? Because everything's a particle, right? Even gravity has to be a particle, right? Even the fields, they still focus on the gravity, right? So the black hole information paradox is basically they don't know what happens to information. They don't know what happens to light. They thought it was all light in there. They thought a black hole was based on a mass being bigger than another mass, or it'd be a neutron star, but then there's many black holes. They don't know what they're talking about, okay? So, just to throw an axe into the gravitational view of the universe, okay? Because we already talked about what gravity is, and we're not denying the phenomenon. We're just explaining what it is, okay? There's something called the great attractor that they found, okay? And within the CMB, there's a point in which they call an attractive point, and then a point in which they call a repulsive point or a repellent point. And the attracting point they call the great attractor. And the repellent point they call the great repeller. Okay. But what that basically is there's within the CMB, right, which is a picture of the universe they took, right? Within that, they see that their masses are attracted to a certain region of that, okay? Outside of gravity. Okay, so this is a thing that's not gravity that attracts things inside the universe, okay? And they're going to say it's probably not magnetic either, right? And they don't really know what it is, okay? Because they truly don't understand the compression and refraction, Okay. Or they choose to ignore it with the Invention Secrecy Act, and then they put these puppets as the faces, and then they know the real stuff, and they teach people for engineering purposes, the old stuff. We're like on analog compared to what they behind closed scenes. Anyway, so what we're proposing here, with this is the evidence of the proposal. Okay, so from my other videos, what we concluded so far is that the universe is not expanding, okay, and it's frequency based, okay, based on fields and excitations, right? And the universe exists within the Milky Way galaxy because there's no expansion, right? And because of that, we also have to consider general relativity, special relativity aren't working out within our universe that's within this Milky Way, right? So a theory and a scientist that had a different view of gravity and the universe, he came along, and Einstein, special relativity, general relativity, actually used some of his works. His name is Ernest Mach. Okay, and Mach was a geocentrist, so he knew that everything spun around the Earth, not that the Earth orbited the sun and everything orbited the sun, right? Anyway, he has a model, and they kind of recreated a model using his works and Newton's works. Okay, it's called the Newtonian Machian analysis of the Neo-Tychonian model of planetary motions. Okay, this is by Luka Popov. Okay, and it basically explains the universe in a geocentric view. Okay, and it basically, like Mach, has the inertia of all the movements of the celestial bodies in the universe recreating a sort of gravitational force. So he viewed gravity as inertia, okay, which is actually the loss of inertia, right? But they always teach science backwards, and it's because they view things backwards. Because when you see a magnet, you think those two things are attracting, and by observation, it sounds and seems correct. Okay, so by observation, it seems correct that the inertia is what's creating the gravity, but it's actually the loss of inertia. Okay, so if anyone wants to view that, okay, this is how the universe works. I'm not saying all the science and math is correct, but this is science and math helping us get to the answers to where we're trying to get to. Okay, because we know the universe spins around us and we don't spin around the universe. Okay, and we know that because there's no experiment that could prove that we move. Okay, and everything they use is motion, those bits of evidence, we're going to go through that on the Earth series when I go through Earth. Okay, and we're going to see that they're just talking about ether drift and different things like that. Okay, and we're going to have the scientific evidence to back it up. Okay, and a good example of that is Coriolis effect. Okay, because the Earth don't spin two ways. Okay, so if Coriolis effect is Earth spinning, the Earth don't spin two ways. Okay, remember that. We're going to come with straight facts and evidence using the scientific method. We're not playing with these people. We're not playing with these people. Okay, too many people died. Too many people were called demons, pagans, all types of shit. I ain't playing with these people. I'm not playing with these people. Okay, anyway, that's what this whole series is about. This whole series, not even this little 3-part series on Fraudstein. This whole series on this channel is part of a larger series that's going on to scientifically demonstrate that our ancestors is right and they have been teaching us lies. Okay, that's what's up. That's what it is. Okay, so to further show evidence of the point I'm trying to make, okay, anyone can watch this video. Okay, it's on YouTube. It's called Newton versus Mach, the bucket experiment. Okay, and within this video they demonstrate how Mach's view on the bucket and his science and his mathematics makes sense compared to Newton's thoughts and how he viewed it. Okay, that's straight evidence on Mach's universe, which is more evidence for what we're concluding, which is the Earth is the center of everything going on. Okay, which is what the ancients said, which is what everyone said, because it's a fact, okay? And we're going to further solidify that in other videos, okay? So, to conclude this video, all right, a little bit more evidence for someone who wants to read, okay? On the Origins of Inertia by D.W. Sciama, Sciama. If I butchered your name, I apologize. He might not even be alive. It's written a long time ago, okay? If he's alive, I apologize, okay? And if he's passed on, then he's passed on, okay? But we're going to read the summary, okay, briefly, okay, to show why this is evidence of what I'm talking about, okay? As Einstein has pointed out, general relativity does not account satisfactorily for the inertial properties of matter. So that an adequate theory of inertia is still lacking. This paper describes a theory of gravitation which ascribes inertia to an inductive effect of distant matter. In the rest frame in the rest frame of any body, the gravitational field of the universe as a whole cancels the gravitational field of local matter, so that in this frame the body is free. Thus, in this theory, inertial effects arise from the gravitational field of a moving universe. For simplicity, gravitational effects are calculated in flat space-time by means of Maxwell-type field equations, although a complete theory of inertia requires more complicated equations. This theory differs from general relativity principally in the following respect. Okay, so this is a scientific paper written in 1952 where they also, just like Mach, agreed that inertia is what gravity is, okay, and they disagree with Einstein, okay. Well, they disagree with general relativity because Einstein didn't do shit, okay. But anyway, this series was evidence on how Einstein's a fraud. He didn't write none of that stuff, okay, and general relativity is wrong based on their own assumptions, okay, and there's evidence, scientific evidence, papers on papers, evidence on evidence, okay, and that experiment from Stanford shows that they're going to be biased and they're going to disregard everything and they're going to have this man as their king and their god, okay, and have these teachings as their gods were, okay. In the next part, we're taking down quantum physics, okay. But for now, I hope people can see the mind poison that they've been teaching, and I hope they can also see that there's science that shows otherwise, and it shows that our ancients were right when you want to look at the truth and not just be satisfied with math equations which could be interpreted different ways, okay. So until the next video, y'all, peace.